Well, hi class. Now we're going to get started on muscles that move the thigh. So these muscles are going to have their origins somewhere up on the pelvis, up in the pelvis. Remember the pelvis, this bone up in through here. And they're going to have action on the hip joint, So before we get started on this, I want you to make out a sheet that looks something like this. Muscles that move the thigh. The origins are all on the pelvis. Action occurs at the hip joint. You're going to have a slot for hip flexion with 1, 2, and then you'll have a 1 plus a 2. We'll explain what that means. And then a 3 and a 4. 3 and a 4 are going to have stars by them. If they have stars by them, it means these muscles will cross two joints. So if they cross two joints, they're going to have actions at both the joints they cross. So that's for the hip flexors. For the hip extendors, you're going to have 1, then 2, 3, 4. These last 3 muscles are commonly known as the hamstrings. They all cross at 2 joints. And then you're going to have hip abduction. These are going to be lateral muscles, 3 of those. And hip adduction. These are going to be medial muscles, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 has a star. So you can pause this video while you make up this piece of paper so you can add it to your paper as we're discussing these muscles, and then you'll have a good idea on how their actions are working. So let's get started. Oops. Bring this up. Here we go. So make sure you have your master list in front of you again, as always. So the first muscle that we're looking at is psoas major. The P is silent. Psoas major. Now this muscle its origin is way up in the pelvis. So we're going to just go deep. It's going to be deep, so we got to go through this muscle. What's this muscle? This is your external oblique. So we're going to hide that. And here is our internal oblique. We're going to hide that guy. And here is, let's hide it. Internal oblique, hide that one. And here's the rectus abdominis, hide that guy. And the transversus abdominis, hide that guy. And we're going to get rid of this little muscle too. So I want to show you that this muscle, the psoas major, is this guy. And he is way back in here, way back in the abdominal cavity. So I'm just for grins, I'm going to show you how far back he is. So here is, we just add the kidney. So the kidney sits way in the back here. So this muscle is behind the kidney. And then we are going to add all the organs of all the intestinal organs, the abdominal organs. So this muscle, I just want you to know, is way back there. So let's get rid of the digestive system, get rid of the kidneys. So here is our psoas major. So let's just isolate this guy. There he sits. So psoas, the origin is going to be on the anterior bodies and transverse processes of T12. Here's the last rib, rib 12, T12, all the way down to L5, the last lumbar vertebrae. So that is going to be the origin. The insertion, bring this guy up. Remember, this was your greater tubercle, the greater trochanter, trochanter, and the lesser trochanter is right here. You can see the lesser trochanter better on this side. And there's going to be a ligament here. We'll show you this in class and on our cadavers. This is the inguinal ligament, an inguinal ligament. So this muscle, which is in the abdominal cavity, is going to be coming leaving the abdominal cavity and going out through this area, and it's going to be going under the inguinal ligament, and it's going to attach to the lesser trochanter. So the action that you need to know for this muscle, it's obviously crossing the hip joint. Here's the hip joint, I to O. It is going to be doing flexion of the thigh, flexion of the thigh, I to O, flexion of the thigh. Oops. So that is the psoas major. You have a right and a left. I am just showing you one of them here. So let's go back to our next muscle on the list. And this muscle is next to it. So that was the, that was the psoas. This is the iliacus. Now the iliacus, remember this is the iliac fossa of the pelvis. Now the iliacus sits right next to the psoas major, so its origin is up here in the pelvis too. And let's go ahead and isolate it out. Its insertion is also on the lesser trochanter, So it and the psoas major are both inserting on the lesser trochanter of the femur. So again, I to O. Remember this was your iliac fossa? So the muscle, the iliacus, is right there in that iliac fossa. I to O, it's going to be lifting that femur upwards. And remember, we have that inguinal ligament here. So on your list, you are going to write down psoas major and iliacus has under the flexion of the thigh. And then I have 1 plus 2. So let's show you what 1 plus 2 is. So I'm going to take off this muscle. I'm going to hide that muscle. So here we have the inguinal ligament. So the psoas major and the iliacus are both coming out right here, and they're both inserting on the lesser trochanter. And these two muscles together, this guy and the iliacus and the psoas major, together, once they leave, they come out underneath the inguinal ligament, we are going to call them the iliopsoas. I-L-I-O-P-S-O-A-S. Iliopsoas. So it's just a mashup of iliacus and psoas major. Iliopsoas. So if you just had here on this side, we have all our muscles intact. We haven't taken any of them off, so these are all superficial muscles here. So the iliopsoas, what you're going to find, you're going to see it here and here. So that's what it's going to look like on the cadaver. If you got the inguinal ligament here and all the abdominal muscles are intact, you're just going to see these two little muscles. It's okay to call them iliopsoas. Iliopsoas. Got that? So they are both hip flexors. So the next muscle, let's go back and put everything back together and reset. So now we reset everything. Now the next muscle, we have a right and left. I hate it when it does that. We have a right and left. This is Sartorius. Sartorius, L-O-N-G. You've heard of notorious, B-I-G? Well, this is Sartorius, Sartorius, L-O-N-G. I will show you the Sartorius stance, and that will give you the action of the Sartorius. It's like if you're sitting down and you're going to look at the gum that's stuck to the bottom of your shoes, you would be lifting your hip up and out to look at the gum at the bottom of your shoes. Well, that's basically the action of Sartorius. But I'll show you that in class. So Sartorius, so you got one on each side, and let's isolate this guy out. So you can see Sartorius, its origin is on the anterior superior iliac spine. Remember your anterior superior iliac spine? And it is crossing over, and it's going to be inserting on the tibia, and it's on the medial surface of the proximal end of the tibia. So that is Sartorius. Real easy muscle to find, and it has a really cool action. And you will see it does cross the knee, so it's also going to be doing what to the knee? It's bending the knee. So we are saying that the Sartorius is also going to be doing flexion of the knee. But we haven't got to the knee yet, but it does cross the knee, so when we get there, it's going to be one of our knee flexors. So Sartorius, it crosses the hip joint, and it crosses the knee joint, so it will have action at both of these joints. The hip, it will, I to O, is going to be pulling the hip joint flexion, and also bending the knee, which is flexion of the knee. So that is Sartorius, Sartorius. Let's see, next on your list, rectus femoris. So rectus femoris. Now the rectus femoris is one of your quad muscles. Obviously you have, if they're quad muscles, you got 4 of them, but the rectus femoris is one right in the middle, and it's the only one of your quad muscles that actually crosses 2 joints. So let's isolate out the rectus femoris. So there is the rectus femoris isolated out. So you can see its origin is, well, it's by the anterior inferior iliac spine. It's more by the anterior inferior iliac spine, and its insertion is going to be, we have this is a muscle tendon, the quadriceps tendon. Remember, tendons connect muscle to bone. That's the quadriceps tendon. And here's the patella. And ultimately, it's going to be going to the patellar ligament. To all the quads are going to be inserting on the tibial tuberosity. So we'll see this in class, but remember your tibial tuberosity here, and on your knee model, we had the patellar ligament. Why is it a ligament? Ligaments connect bone to bone. So the patella is a bone. Obviously the tibia is a bone, so this is the patellar ligament. But this is the quadriceps tendon because this is connecting muscle to bone. So what we see here with the rectus femoris is it is going to have action at the hip joint. Yes. I to O, so it's going to be causing hip flexion also. And it's also going to have action at the knee joint. And we'll do the action at the knee joint when we get to all the quads because they all have the same action. But for now, make sure you put the rectus femoris under your hip flexion slot. So rectus femoris, the only quad muscle that crosses 2 joints. It's going to be crossing the knee joint because the ligament here is going to essentially give it It's essentially going to have it cross the knee joint. So that is your rectus femoris. So recap, you have your hip flexors, you have your psoas major, you have your iliacus. Remember what those look like? Once they cross under the inguinal ligament, it's the iliopsoas. Then you have Sartorius, then you have rectus femoris. So for you guys, those are going to be your main hip flexors. So if these are hip flexors and these are all anterior muscles, we would expect our hip extendors to be where? On the opposite side, and they are. So now we're going to the back side, and let's start with the first muscle that's on your list, the gluteus maximus. Gluteus maximus. So here's your gluteus maximus. Big muscle in the behind. Let's isolate that guy out. Excuse me. So its origin is going to be on the iliac crest in the sacrum area here, and its insertion is going to be just below the greater trochanter over here. So what you guys are going to be knowing, I mean, this does other actions at the hip joint, but for you guys, all you need to know is this is going to go I to O, and it's going to extend your hip back. So it's going to extend the femur backwards. So if you just hold on to your gluteus and then you do hip extension, you can feel that big gluteus maximus contract. So I want you to put gluteus maximus under one of your hip extendors. So that's one of your hip extendors. It only crosses one joint, so it is only having action at the hip joint. So that's the gluteus maximus. Now the next three muscles, we are going to be doing your hamstrings. Now, I read once why they were called hamstrings. It had something to do with when they were butchering animals and they hung up the hamstrings by a big hook. That's all I remember. They called them their hamstrings. But they're three muscles, and we got the biceps femoris, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus. So let's look. I'm going to do this side. I don't know why. I just like this side better. We're going to be just concentrating on this one. So this first one, the biceps femoris, it has two heads. That's why it's called biceps. This is its long head. And let's go ahead and hide the glutes. Let's hide that. So what we're going to see is all three of these muscles are going to have their origin up on the, remember this big the big fat part of the pelvis, the ischial tuberosity. They're all going to originate right up in here. But let's start with the biceps femoris. And let's isolate that guy out. Now there's another part of the biceps femoris, the other head. It's the short head. But let's just concentrate on this one because this is the big one. This is the one that you're going to be concentrating on. So biceps femoris. How are you going to remember this one? Well, let's go back here. Here's the lateral part of your leg, right? And here's the medial part of your leg. And this is going to be, I'm going to call it your BFF. This is your new BFF, biceps femoris fibula. Remember, the tibia is your thick inner bone. So the tibia is going to be the medial bone. And your fibula, fibulala, LA, is your lateral bone. So fibula, so the biceps femoris, it's going to be inserting on the fibula side. So this is going to be the most lateral of your hamstrings. So biceps femoris. So it's going to have action on the hip, and let's see if I get this a little bit smaller. If I to O, this is going to be a hip extender, and I'm trying to put my hand back in here. So hip extension. Let me pause this. Pause. So I had to pick up a piece of paper I dropped. So if you stand up and you extend your hip out, you extend your hip, you will feel the gluteus maximus, and below it you're going to feel the hamstrings also contracting. So all the hamstrings are for hip extension. You can see it's crossing the hip joint. It's going to be crossing the hip joint, and it's going to be crossing the knee joint too, and we'll talk about the knee in a little bit. So the hamstrings all are going to cross two joints, so they're going to have actions on two joints. But for hip, you're going to have it as one of your hip extenders. So that's the biceps femoris. Next to biceps femoris is going to be the semitendinosus. Semitendinosus. So when you're looking at these two muscles, either on the cadaver or on the leg model, they are essentially just kissing each other right here. Semitendinosus, it's on the tibia side. So this is going to be the medial one. If you isolate this guy out, put him on the back side, here is the ischial tuberosity. I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to bring it down a little bit. Remember, this is the big bulky part of the pelvis, the ischial tuberosity. Here's your ischial spine, ischial tuberosity. And then bring this up, it's inserting on the tibia. So this is also going to have action at both the knee joint and the hip joint, and this is also going to be giving you hip extension at the hip joint. Now the semimembranosus is deep to semitendinosus. So let's go ahead and hide our semitendinosus, and here is going to be semimembranosus. So semimembranosus is pretty big. He is pretty big, and you're going to see him peeking on the medial side here too. So semimembranosus, let's isolate him out. Let's put it in the back. Here's your ischial tuberosity. It's also on the tibial side, the medial side here. So this is semimembranosus. It's deep to semitendinosus, crosses the hip joint and the knee joint. I want you to put him under the slot for hip extenders too. So let's just review those three hamstrings again. On your lateral side, on your fibula side, you have your BFF, biceps femoris. Then next to biceps femoris, right next to biceps femoris, is semitendinosus. Semitendinosus on your tibial side. Deep to semitendinosus is going to be the semimembranosus, which is a really big muscle. But you can see the semimembranosus peeking out here. And that'll be easy to see on the cadaver. It'll be kind of easy to see on the leg models in the room that we have that are in our room too. So those are the three hamstrings, and together with the Gluteus maximus, those are going to make up the hip extendors. And on the front side, we had our psoas major. The bulk of the muscle obviously is up in the abdominal cavity. The iliacus, and together they're going to make up the iliopsoas once they come out underneath the inguinal ligament. Then we're going to have Sartorius, Sartorius, and you are going to have Rectus femoris, the only quad muscle that crosses two joints, so it's going to have action at the hip joint and knee joint. So those four muscles, iliacus, psoas major, sartorius, and rectus femoris, you're going to put them under your hip flexors. So our next video we'll be doing the hip ab and adductors. So that's it for these muscles.